next prolific speaker is CA Amarjit Chopra, who is one of the most dynamic presidents ICAI has ever had. His profile is so powerful and power-packed that if I were to read it fully, we would reach next year international conference. To mention a few, CA Amarjit Chopra was the first chairman of Financial Reporting Review Board of ICAI. He has chaired various positions like Accounting Standard Board for 2 years, of the committee constituted by ICAI for implementation of IFRS in India, and many other positions. What I personally like the most is he has delivered more than 500 lectures on accounting standards and IFRS. And from my personal knowledge, I know to serve the human side of our profession, he regularly spares time to provide free coaching to CA students. Thanks a lot. He definitely deserves this applause. With a practice of profession in chartered accountancy for more than 38 years, and with more than 500 lectures being delivered till now, I am personally too excited for the next session. With a lot of pride, I invite CA Amarjit, and I now request CA Aftab Siddiqui to escort CA Amarjit Chopra to the dais.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my very sincere thanks to Sanjay, Kapil and the entire executive committee of Bahrain chapter of ICAI for having provided this opportunity to share some of my thoughts this afternoon. When I was being introduced, I thought either there is a wrong audience or there is an introduction of a wrong speaker for that particular matter. I don't know what it was. And when I was walking up, I had a very funny feeling, very frankly, and I was thinking that what kind of situation it is that neither you nor I know what I am going to speak. Because speaking on IFRS, coming from India, having spent 70% of my time as a president of the institute, only to make sure that the institute does not fail in its commitment to provide IFRS equivalent standards. And when we did it in December, we held almost 16 council meetings. And what kind of meetings we held in respect of the Accounting Standard Board or NACAS, I don't have a count. My hats off to Mr. Manoj Fadnis and Dr. Avinash Chandra for that achievement. The only thing that we didn't want to do was to fail the commitment of the Honorable Prime Minister of the country, who had made a commitment in G20 that we will make sure that the IFRS will be implemented in the country effective 1/4/2011. And then came the big day. And then the industry started representing one by one. I will not like to name who, but I think you can all make out. And they first started with that we don't have the actuaries in the country. Then they said, where is the wherewithal? We have not still developed as a profession. We have not prepared ourselves for the implementation of IFRS. I was addressing one of the CFOs meeting in Mumbai as a president. And the biggest group in the country, his CFO stood up and said, where are the actuaries in the country? And I asked him only one question, that you have raised a lot of finances from abroad. You are still converting your Indian gaps to foreign gaps, whichever gap you are converting into. There are actuaries, then that is why you are getting it converted. So at least you cannot raise this particular objection. And after that, it's a history, believe me. Ministries have undergone a change, and first minister underwent a change only because of IFRS, I can assure you that. But nothing happened, nothing moved as a consequence of that. But now the government seems to have waken up, and they say that we'll implement it effective 1/4/2015. And the biggest group in the country, his CFO stood up and said, where are the actuaries in the country? And I asked him only one question, that you have raised a lot of finances from abroad. you are still converting your Indian gaps to foreign gaps, whichever gap you are converting into. There are actuaries, then that is why you are getting it converted. So at least you cannot raise this particular objection. And after that, it's a history, believe me. Ministries have undergone a change, and first minister underwent a change only because of IFRS, I can assure you that. But nothing happened, nothing moved as a consequence of that. But now the government seems to have waken up, and they say that we'll implement it effective 1/4/2015. Let us see what can happen. I can only say that we have held almost more than 115 batches of IFRS. We have trained people. How many lectures, how many seminars we have conducted on IFRS, I don't think Institute has got the count thereof. Mr. Mallya is there, and I will definitely like to say, he's one fellow who has actually inspired me all my life. For the last 6-7 years, I have been in his contact. His way of conducting the proceedings everywhere has been an inspiration. I wrote even in my first address as the president of the institute in the journal. I acknowledge his contribution towards my life. But why I'm referring to his name is because of the banking. The one thing that I always feel about IFRS and banking is that Mr. Mallya referred to something happening in 2008 and saying that the Indian banks were resilient enough not to be exposed to the risk, as we saw the banks after banks in US, UK, German really falling apart. India was the only jurisdiction where it didn't happen. And why it didn't happen? One was, yes, it was a coordinated effort of the government and the regulator, that's the Reserve Bank of India. And I must compliment the then governor of Reserve Bank of India, Mr. Reddy. I think he did absolutely fantastic job. And we felt proud that we were connected to the banks because the Indian banking system was only one which didn't fail at that particular point of time. We did not fail because we didn't follow IFRS till that time. Because the entire IFRS is what? It is all principle based. What Indian banking has is rule based provisioning. What we call as the provisioning with regard to prudential norms. Believe me, when in 89-90, for the first time I went to a particular bank, I am not naming the bank, I am not naming the party. I went for the first time to audit that particular bank. There was a party in Delhi, and at that time $4 million used to be a huge amount. In today's value, I am telling, about 20 crore of rupees. And whenever we used to pass through that building, we used to look at that building with some kind of an awe. Yeah, this is one company to which the bank has given about 20-25 crore rupees. It must be really something. And when we went to audit that particular bank, and we looked at the account of that particular party, 85% of the outstanding was nothing but the interest accrued but not received. Because at that time, the income recognition norms, the prudential norms were not in vogue. And the bank will keep on saying that I have got this security. So when I have got the security, where is the question of providing anything and why I should not recognize the interest? And the property value is far, far higher than the value of the loan. If the principle-based IFRS or IAS was to be followed, I say IAS 39, we should have impaired that asset. We never impaired that because, and that's what is happening today. Believe me, wherever prudential norms are not there, this impairment of the financial asset is a big, big flaw. And I think India has a lead in this. And that is why we say that our banking system is still resilient. We might say that we have got lakhs and lakhs of rupees as NPA, or rather crores now, I will not say lakhs. Lakhs of crores of rupees as NPA. But at the same time, I think the banks are provided for. There's no doubt about it. Even when we restructure a loan, we are creating additional provisions. I think that's the test. And that is where I feel very confident. Where our loan is fully secured, after 5 years, I provide 100% against that. Now, one can argue with me that whether under IFRS it is a provision or it is a reserve. That is a different matter. Because provision is against an asset and liability, and you have got something which is in addition to the provision. Now, whether it is a reserve or a provision, that is a different matter, but we definitely have the capacity to withstand any kind of a situation in the periods to come. There is no doubt about it. Quality of assets has been bad. That's a different matter. I don't want to get into that particular debate at all. Another point, friends, that one will like to definitely talk of is, we all talk of presenting under the IFRS, under Indian accounting standards. In the IFRS, we talk of truly and fairly presentation. In India, we talk of true and fair. Meaning is the same. I don't see any difference between the two. But my worry has been, whatever way you disclose, because it is the transparency versus business interest when we are talking, or whether transparency really takes care of the public interest also or not, that is very important. What I learned from the British Paints case in India, which started in 64 and went up to 1988-89 to be decided by the Supreme Court of India, that wherein British Paints case had valued its inventories on the direct costing method, the work in progress on the direct costing method. And one of the learned officers one day said that you cannot do it, it has to be based upon absorption costing method, otherwise your work in progress is not properly valued. The matter went on, British Paints went on arguing that we have been disclosing it, we have been writing everywhere, and no other income tax officer has ever rejected our books of accounts as a consequence thereof. The Supreme Court ultimately upheld the contention of the income tax officer and said, no, it was wrong. You couldn't have done it. No way. Because a wrong accounting policy followed and disclosed does not become valid at the end of the day. So transparency is one part. Yes, you did something, you disclosed it, but does it really become valid at the end of the day? To me, what is shocking is, and I think auditing profession is to be equally blamed for it, whenever I change an accounting policy, what is the rule? My standard only says one thing, that if there is a change in the accounting, although it lays down the rules for the change in the accounting policy, let me be very clear about it. It lays down the rule that you can change the accounting policy only when there is a change in standard, there is a change in law, or the change in accounting policy will result into fairer presentation of the financial statements. But is it a fact? When we change the accounting policy, despite these three conditions being laid down, I think we change the accounting policy, at least in India, I can say at the drop of a hat. If a public issue is to come, we change our depreciation accounting policy from WDV to straight line method of depreciation. And if the MAT is implemented, we change it from straight line to WDV method. I think this is where we have gone wrong. We make it apparent. We are transparent in that. There is no doubt about it. We do disclose that the accounting policy has been changed, because this is the requirement of the standard, that if you change the accounting policy, please disclose the fact and the effect of the change in the accounting policy, and if you do that, the auditor does not come into play. I think this is where we have gone wrong. This transparency has no meaning. It does not protect the public interest. It might protect the business interest, but it does not protect the public interest under certain circumstances. I think we need to really study that particular part far more carefully. Business environments, legal environment in different jurisdictions will definitely require different things to be laid down by way of the standards. When it came to the investing property in India, when we were laying down the IFRS equivalent standard, we were very clear that we will not allow the multiple option of revaluing it and the cost model. We said we will only allow the cost model. Because in India, if you allow, the person will immediately revalue something and take it to the P&L account. Why should I allow that kind of a situation to happen in investing property? Because that's not the purpose. We did not allow that, because we knew our legal system is weak. Because even if someone goes to the court, because the class action suits were not there, now thanks to the change in the Companies Act that the class action suits have come, that if anyone feels damaged, if anyone feels that his interest has been hurt, he can go to the court of law and seek damages against a particular party. But earlier it was not there. So we thought, no, we will very clearly restrict it, that it will be only a cost model and will not allow the other way around under any circumstances. And not only that, I think one of the very surprising features of IFRS has been, if you look at IAS 39, I never realized till the time I went through the IAS at that time, when we were really bringing in the equivalent standards, that if you have borrowed earlier at a lower amount, say you borrowed certain funds at 10%, and today because of your credit failing, because your credit rating has gone down, and now you can borrow only at 15%, you can revalue your earlier financial liabilities and book the gain as a consequence thereof. I think this is absolutely ridiculous. How one could do it? And IAS continued to allow it. We banned it. We said we will prohibit this kind of situation. We will not allow that if at all there are gains on account of your financial liabilities, on account of fall in your own credit, that you can book a gain as a consequence thereof. Now, IASB has also woken up. They have also gone ahead and they have said, no, we will not allow that kind of situation provided these conditions are fulfilled. And now they are talking of routing it through the other comprehensive income. But why other comprehensive income even in that particular case? I think somewhere or the other, IASB must be very, very clear as to what is to happen. When I was talking of the needs of the different jurisdictions, peculiarities of the different jurisdictions, I tell you, in India and New Zealand, we share one commonality. We share the commonality that we have got rate-regulated entities in large number, for that matter. Whether we have the telecom, we have the power, we have the others, we have the industries where someone else fixes the rate that you cannot charge beyond this. Now, what is going to be my cost component? That is being determined by the other party. Now, if my interest element is more, my other cost components are more, there can be a case of deferred tax, there can be a case of deferred asset or deferred liability on account of these regulated entities. Now, we took up, I tell you, in 2007, I became the chairman of the ASB. At that time, we took up this particular matter with the IASB. IASB kept on dilly-dallying, that only 2 countries are there where this kind of situation is there. Then they have ultimately taken up this project, they exposed it, but still nothing has happened, which we can talk of. But in India now we are coming out with a sort of a guidance with regard to such entities, that what kind of accounting treatment needs to be given in those cases. It's as good as deferred tax asset or deferred tax liability if you ask me. There is no doubt in my mind. And if you look at IFRS situation, now I'm again coming to the transparency or whatever booking you have to do. If I look at the taxes on income, in India, when we drafted our accounting standard on taxes on income, we said that in respect of the losses, you will be able to create a deferred tax asset only when there is a virtual certainty of its being realized, not reasonable certainty. Because if you allow reasonable certainty, then what will happen, nobody knows. But IFRS allows, International Accounting Standard allows it based upon reasonable certainty, believe me. And in India, where we talk of the virtual certainty, what has happened is one of the Gujarat companies, listed entities, and there are 2, but one company I remember much better because it was a deferred tax asset of 62 crore rupees. What they have done is they have created a deferred tax asset of 62 crore rupees, and in the director's report, please read what the director report begins with. The director report begins with, future outlook of the business is gloomy. The policies of the government are all against the industry. The company is likely to continue to incur the losses and create a deferred tax asset of 62 crore rupees. We still were maintaining virtual certainty, even not reasonable certainty. Where it is reasonable certainty, what can happen? You can say we have followed the standard. But what followed the standard? If you are able to create a deferred tax asset like this, and auditor keeps silent on that, I don't think I have to say anything beyond. Another point, friends, that I would like to say is, particularly with regard to, I'm more on the fair valuation. Fair valuation, what kind of, how fair is fair valuation? This is being debated about everywhere, if you ask me. Now, if you look at IFRS 13, which talks of measurement, principles with regard to fair valuation. It talks of highest value, best use. I think the most ridiculous language that one could have ever used. Why I say so? I am running an industry. I am into manufacturing of sugar. I have got land with me. I can value this land based upon the assumption that I will convert it into a real estate, sell the flats or create a showroom here and then sell it out. I don't know what I am trying to do. Then what kind of going concern we are referring to? My basic presumption in any accounting is that the company will continue to be there. The company will continue to carry its operations. If that is going to be the case, I cannot get to the realizable value of the asset. There is no way. And realizable also to some other use. I still remember we were auditing one of the banks way back in 1996. And the property was somewhere. And it was an industry. The change of land user had not taken place. And they showed it as if it will be sold out to a real estate wala. And real estate wala will create the flats of marble, etc., and then sell it out and created the valuation. I said, you should have shown that you will create a Taj Mahal there and then sell it out. Why do you want to say that you will only create the flats here and then sell it out? Unfortunately, now it is the standard which says that. So what do you do about it? I think I leave it to your judgment for that matter. What I am saying is, it is not that the standards are infallible. Standards are also fallible. And we have to really represent. Take the cases of leases, IAS 17. Leases is one standard which was distinguishing between operating and finance lease. Now, finance lease you take on balance sheet, operating lease you don't take. But what happened in many failures of the companies, I think all these non-disclosed or non-balance sheet items really led to the failure of those enterprises. Today, IASB is on it. Now IASB is saying, they are effective 2015, that if you have an operating lease beyond a period of 12 months, you will have to take it the value of the asset as well as the liability on the books, even if it is an operating lease. Because what was happening was, that actually a finance lease was being structured as an operating lease. So all those things were really coming to the head. So now it has been very clearly, the structuring of the deals was such that you could, and the side letters, the way these are exchanged, I don't have to say anything about it, I think in the industries. So now it is very clear that the IASB has come very heavily on it, and they say nothing doing. You will have to go into the mode of disclosing it. Effective 2015, if at all these operating leases are also beyond a period of 12 months, then create the right to use will be the word that you will have to use in respect of such assets. We all have learnt about one concept, which is the concept of incurred loss model versus the expected loss model. Believe me, when we used to audit the banks, and today also when we audit the banks, or any institution for that matter, we always come across a situation that the account has already been termed as non-performing account. It is a non-performing account without doubt. The party has already got any number of bank guarantees issued by you, LCs issued by you. Only 2 of the LCs have already devolved. One of the guarantee has already been invoked. Another 9 guarantees are still to be invoked, and it is in the offing. You can very well make out that it is bound to happen. And probably another 5 LCs are going to devolve upon you. But because it is an incurred loss model, because till the time that event occurs, which creates a loss to you, you cannot book a loss in respect thereof. Why you are not booking all these losses, for that matter? But it will continue to be there. And now they say, yes, the situation is emerging now. Probably IASB will be coming out with the date, etc., when it is going to happen. But expected loss model is bound to come in. I have absolutely no doubt so far as that particular part is concerned. Revenue recognition. I think in this part of the country, in this part of the world, there have to be certain situations. We have lived in a very easy situation. Someone said that CA is the toughest course, there is no doubt about it. At least Indian CA course is very tough. And I can bet one thing, anyone who has qualified Indian Chartered Accountancy, he cannot fail anywhere in the world. There is no doubt in my mind. Because I still remember the words of one of the past presidents who will always say that a student during the exam times always goes to the temple. Will always go to the temple. And will keep on praying morning, evening, every time. And particularly around the result time, there is no chance that he will fail to go to the temple. So he saw that it was written, God never fails. He wrote underneath, let God appear in the Indian CA examination. Let it be the test of the person concerned. So what I am trying to say is, now revenue, sometimes I wonder why people call me to speak on accounting standards, because when I qualified, what to talk of accounting standard board was not there. Had I been subjected to the test of accounting standards, probably I couldn't have qualified as a chartered accountant. Who knows? But luckily at that time, neither the audit assurance standards were there, nor the accounting standards were there. Now, we read revenues recognition from a very different perspective. And it was, if you sell the goods, recognize the revenue, provided there is a transfer of risks and rewards in respect of the property of the goods. Fortunately, unfortunately for us, of course, that's the position of IFRS. Let me be very clear about it. When we talk of IAS 11 and IAS 18, they prescribe that in respect of the sale of the goods, there has to be a transfer of the risks and rewards. We changed our standard on construction contracts, and we stopped allowing the choice of completion method with regard to the construction contracts. In our earlier standard, the real estate transactions were being covered by the AS7, our standard. That was under IAS 11. But when we changed it, we took out the real estate transactions out of that, because we wanted to deal with the income tax office. Income tax office people were saying that you please don't allow this completion method choice to the construction contracts, because what is happening is, or to the real estate transactions, that the person till the time he gets a loss in the other project, he does not show the profit in the first project. He says that the project has not been completed so far. So we changed it. But when we changed it, we realized it was a folly. Because if we go to IFRIC 15 today, what does IFRIC 15 say? IFRIC 15 is dealing with the same situation. That in the case of the real estate transactions, unless you can really bring out that the agreement says that the delivery of the goods and services is different from the construction part thereof, then it is only on the completion method. You cannot do it other way around. Because there should be a very clear distinction between the supply of the goods compared to the other services. Now, having changed it, now what has happened is, if somebody is selling me a flat today, all the risks are with him till the time he hands over me the peaceful possession of this particular property. So if the real estate owner has actually to really look at it, at what particular point of time to book the sale, in my view, honestly, I personally feel he cannot book it till the time he has handed me over the possession, because the only right which is transferred to me is the right to sell it at a later point of time if I can make a profit out of it, or even if I want a loss out of it, I can sell it out before even the possession is handed over. What is the risk available? People say the risk available is that if at all there is a clause in the agreement with regard to the price variation, and if the price can undergo a change, that's the risk available with me. I don't think that's the risk. The risk is, if someone is constructing and one has to pass on the possession, if in between earthquake comes, flood comes, there is a theft of any of the things, who will make good that particular loss? It is the real estate developer who has to make good the loss. So probably all those construction companies which are into this business, or the real estate companies which are into this business, if they want percentage completion method to be followed, in that case they must make very sure what kind of structuring of the agreement can be done, wherein you can show that the control with regard to the design, with regard to the structure, with regard to anything else lies with the buyer. And he can get the design changed at a given point of time. He can say, okay, I don't want this, I want the other part of the material used. If that can be done, probably yes. Otherwise, I think it's a fait accompli that you will have to look at the other side of the story. As I said, as the economy grows, as there are complexities in the business which come in, the accounting undergoes a change. And I think IFRS to some extent has definitely kept pace with that. There's no doubt. And I must compliment it for it. You look at what was happening in India till few years back. I will not say few years back, maybe few months back even in certain cases. When the infrastructure projects came in, particularly on BOLT basis, build, operate, lease and transfer. In all those cases, what was happening? It was all happening that the operator would show the fixed asset in his books of accounts. Then came the auditing profession. Believe me, that is done by the auditors. Auditors said, nothing doing. What is your right? Your right is only to collect the toll. Nothing more than that. At the most, if you have to show it as an intangible right with you, to collect the toll and discount it and then show it in your books of account. You cannot show it under IAS 16 under any circumstances. And now that improvement is coming. Because even with the banks, when you mortgage that to them, what you are able to mortgage with the banks, you are only right to collect the toll. Because the land belongs to the government. The structure you are bound to transfer to the government later on at a given point of time. So I think all these things have improved over a period of time. There is no doubt in my mind. But a lot of things will happen in the periods to come. I have been shown the door, I can say, and my rightful place. I will only like to say, friends, whenever I talk of certain things, I think employee benefits is one area we are very transparent, but how many of us are able to read it out? How many of us have been able to make out the assumptions which are given? Go to different banks, go to different industries in the same country. You will have different assumptions in the same industry by the same actuary. With regard to the salary growth, with regard to the discounting rate, with regard to everything. I think transparency is there. But is it really serving the purpose? If you want more profit, you ask the actuary, he will give you. If you want lesser profit, tell the actuary, he will give you. Actuarial valuation has become a laughing stock, if you really ask me, as the valuations are. I think three of the people who have played havoc with the system, rating agencies, actuaries, and the other valuers. I'm not bringing in the legal profession in between because the kind of title search reports they have given, at least in our country, it is mind-blowing. But they have really taken the system to task. I'll only say that when we live in a profession, we have to live with this situation. A person used to go to a particular monastery every day. Monastery was really perched at the top. It was located at the top of a particular steep mountain, and the only way to go there was by way of a rope way. And one day he saw that the ropes strings are getting detached somewhere. These have come out. So he asked the person who was maintaining it, how many times you replace this rope? He said, when it breaks. I think IASB has followed virtually the same principle. That as and when something goes wrong, give a knee-jerk reaction to the entire situation and then see what is going to happen and let it happen. And friends, for you, I can only say that when Mother Teresa was receiving the Nobel Award, she said that when we work all the day very hard, it's like a drop that we put in an ocean. And she said that, but for this drop, the ocean would not be there. And it is duty of each one of us to really put in that particular drop. And then she said that each one of you is a drop, basically. But for you, this conference would not have been a success. It looks like oceanic only because of your presence, friends. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.